Your death is an evolution, not an end. We've been taught to fear death as a final, absolute end, a light that switches off and never turns back on, an abrupt, definitive stop to the story of us. But what if that's a profound misunderstanding? What if some of the terror we feel is based on an incomplete picture of our own biology? What if the process of dying isn't just a system failure, but contains elements of a biological transformation? A final protocol that is far more ordered and infinitely more fascinating than we've ever been led to believe. This isn't a story about ghosts or gods. This is a journey into the scientific evidence that is forcing us to ask new questions. It suggests that your death might not be a period at the end of a sentence, but a complex biological process. A transition that could be the most significant event your brain will ever orchestrate. Section 1. The Code of Shutdown. To understand this, we have to start by challenging our very definition of death. We tend to think of it as a singular moment. The heart stops, breathing ceases, and the lights go out. But scientifically, that's not really the case. After the heart stops pumping, our organs don't all fail instantly and irreversibly. There's a process, a sequence. It's less like a switch being flipped and more like a city undergoing a power down, with some districts going dark before others. Now, on a cellular level, our bodies have a brilliant built-in function for death called programmed cell death, or apoptosis. This isn't a chaotic, messy breakdown. It's an orderly, self-destruct sequence that cells initiate for the good of the whole organism. Think of how your fingers and toes were formed when you were an embryo. It happened because the cells between them were programmed to die, sculpting your hands and feet. It's a process of creation through cessation. While the death of an entire person involves both orderly and disorderly events, like system failure and decay, this principle of a controlled shutdown at the cellular level is a fundamental part of our biology. It's not a bug, it's a feature. But the most startling evidence for this process is found in the command center, the brain. For decades, the assumption was that when the heart stops, the brain quickly and quietly fades to black. Recent research has completely shattered that idea. In a series of groundbreaking studies, neuroscientists monitoring dying human brains have recorded something astonishing. In the final moments of life, sometimes even after the heart has stopped, there can be a massive, coordinated surge of brain activity. Specifically, they've seen a spike in high-frequency electrical signals called gamma waves. These are the same brain waves normally associated with higher-order consciousness, memory retrieval, and heightened perception. In some comatose patients taken off life support, this surge was detected in a hot zone in the back of the brain, an area linked with conscious processing, dreaming, and visual hallucinations. The brain isn't just sputtering out. In its final act, it appears to come alive, generating a flurry of organized activity that raises a tantalizing question. If the brain is capable of orchestrating this complex fireworks finale, what, if anything, does consciousness experience? Section 2. The Inner Universe. This is where the journey takes a turn from the purely biological to the experiential, and into one of the most compelling and controversial hypotheses in modern neuroscience: the role of N,N-dimethyltryptamine, or DMT. And DMT is a powerful psychedelic molecule found throughout nature. For decades, a hypothesis, popularized by Dr. Rick Strassman's book DMT, the Spirit Molecule, has proposed that our own brains might release a flood of this chemical at the moment of death. Let's be very clear. This idea, particularly the notion that the pineal gland is the source, is highly speculative. There is currently no direct evidence in humans that a massive DMT surge happens at death. But here's what is undeniable, and what intriguing new research confirms. The striking phenomenological overlap between a DMT-induced experience and a near-death experience, or NDE. People who have NDS often report a common set of features. A feeling of leaving the physical body, traveling through a tunnel towards a brilliant light, a comprehensive life review, and encounters with benevolent beings. They describe an overwhelming sense of peace, love, and unity. Now, listen to the descriptions from clinical trials where healthy volunteers were administered DMT. They report many of the same features: the feeling of transcending one's body, entering an alternative realm, and communicating with sentient entities. In fact, a landmark 2018 study found that when given a standardized questionnaire used to measure NDEs, participants on DMT reported experiences that showed a remarkable overlap with those reported by people who had actually had a near-death event. The researchers did note some subtle differences, often related to context. Volunteers in a safe clinical setting versus people in a life-or-death crisis. But the similarity was profound. This has led researchers to a fork in the road. Is DMT simply something that can mimic an NDE, but isn't actually involved? Or is the brain, in its final moments, potentially capable of releasing its own supply of a powerful neurochemical, launching consciousness into an internally generated world? This death gateway idea remains unproven, but what the science does show is that our brains are fully capable of producing an experience that is, by every subjective measure, one of the most profound and reality-shattering of a person's life. Section 3. The transformation. Whether this inner journey is a neurochemical artifact or a glimpse into something more, one of its most significant aspects is what happens after. The experience doesn't just end, it often evolves the person who has it. Across cultures and belief systems, one of the most consistent findings in NDE research is their capacity for long-term, positive transformation. Survivors often report a dramatic decrease in their fear of death, a renewed sense of purpose, and an increased capacity for compassion and love. They undergo a profound shift in life priorities, moving away from materialism and towards spiritual values and meaningful relationships. This isn't just anecdotal, it's a well-documented psychological phenomenon. The experience, however it was generated, can leave a permanent and often beautiful mark on their lives. But here's the fascinating part. This transformative effect isn't exclusive to real NDEs. The structured, therapeutic use of psychedelics, particularly psilocybin, magic mushrooms, can also induce mystical-type experiences that lead to similar, lasting positive changes in personality, values, and well-being. The feeling of ego dissolution and unity, whether it happens at the edge of death or in a clinical setting, appears to fundamentally rewire a person's perspective on life and their place in the universe. So, what does this tell us about death? It suggests the experience of dying might not be the horrifying void we've been taught to fear. Instead, it's possible it could be a final, transformative psychological event, orchestrated by our own biology. A process perhaps designed not to terrify, but to comfort. A mechanism that could provide a sense of peace, connection, and meaning at the very threshold of the unknown. This doesn't prove there's an afterlife. It doesn't confirm that consciousness survives the brain. What it does confirm is that the brain itself, this 3-pound universe of ours, holds the capacity for experiences so profound they can eradicate the fear of its own demise. The process of dying, seen through this lens, is no longer just a failure or an accident. It becomes a final, crowning achievement of our biology, an evolution. This is a conversation that touches the deepest parts of our existence. What are your thoughts on this? Is this inner journey a final, beautiful gift from our own biology? A closing act written into our code? Or is it a doorway to something else entirely? I would be fascinated to read your perspectives in the comments below. Conclusion. In the end, science doesn't have all the answers, and maybe it never will. The question of what lies beyond the veil is one that may always remain in the realm of faith and philosophy. But what science is revealing is that the process of crossing that veil is far from a simple, empty void. The dying brain isn't just shutting down in chaos. In some cases, it appears to be igniting in a final, brilliant, and coordinated display. It raises the possibility that we are capable of a final, profound, conscious experience. A journey through an inner landscape sculpted from a lifetime of memories, emotions, and connections. Whether that world is generated solely by the brain or encountered by a consciousness that precedes it, remains the ultimate mystery. But perhaps the answer is less important than the reframing of the question itself. By seeing death not just as a terrifying end, but as a potential biologically rooted evolution, we can change our relationship with our own mortality. It transforms death from an enemy to be feared into a profound biological process to be respected, and perhaps even marveled at. It allows us to focus not just on the final mystery of what happens when we die, but on the immediate miracle of how we live.